Hello and welcome to our webinar where I'm very excited to be talking with founder and president of Planet HIPAA, the amazing Danika Brinda. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And what we're talking about today is HIPAA, which I know is not the best, most exciting topic for a lot of dental practice, but it's hugely important. I think we'll demystify a lot about HIPAA today and talk about, of course, HIPAA Autopilot, which is the all-inclusive HIPAA compliance program, including annual HIPAA training, customized HIPAA policies and procedures, HIPAA risk assessment, ongoing HIPAA compliance and support, and how dental practices are, I think, doing things probably the hard way, and how HIPAA Autopilot is kind of it's like the easy button for HIPAA compliance. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
How do you view HIPAA Autopilot, Danika?
Yeah, that was kind of the intent of building HIPAA Autopilot. Is I worked with many dental practices. They were making HIPAA either super complicated or they were using tools where they thought they were doing the right thing, but just weren't. So as I consulted more and more, I've realized that there was an opportunity to help dental practices in a simple, easy way, as easy as HIPAA can get, right? Because it unfortunately isn't the easiest thing you'll ever do, but the creation of the HIPAA Autopilot product was really to have a one-stop area where practices can go, feel confident about their HIPAA compliance, interact and get their work done as far as like the risk analysis and the policies and procedures, which are probably the two most missed areas of HIPAA compliance when it comes to dental practices, by simple, easy interaction with an online tool. Still, manned by me in the back end, but really built to make it simple and easy and hopefully pretty intuitive to be able to get into HIPAA compliance and not only get there, but also stay there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk with dental practices all the time, every day. And what do you see that offices are doing typically today when it comes to HIPAA compliance and just managing HIPAA?
Well, to be honest, a lot of practices that I work with, they're so focused on just the training aspect, which obviously is such an important component of HIPAA compliance. In fact, probably one of the most important when it comes to helping your staff and your patients ultimately get or feel confident about giving you information. But normally when I walk into a practice, they'll have said, yeah, we built policies and procedures, or we did a risk analysis, or I bought this manual and it's just sitting up on my shelf or something along that line. And when I look at it, it's either very boilerplate language that's not even customized to their organization, or unfortunately, they haven't touched it and there's about an inch of dust on the book, which is not uncommon to see. So again, the focus is normally on the education piece, and the documentation piece kind of sits in the background. So that's really what the product is geared towards, is getting them more proactive, making sure they have policies and procedures, risk analysis. They can show they're trying, because that is one of the biggest things. If you ignore HIPAA or you just don't focus on it, a lot of times it could be viewed as willful neglect from the government standpoint. But if you're trying and you're attempting and you're making, a good faith effort towards it, it's more of a better view of it if you're ever audited or if you ever have some type of complaint that goes to the federal government.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have known each other for years now, because I do a lot of work with like the Minnesota Department of Health Privacy and Security Work Group. Yep. Through Opera DDS, where we did a lot of HIPAA compliant things like secure email. And then now with toothapps, where we're doing interoperability for the entire dental industry. And I've learned a lot, from you. And I know you and I have discussed how HIPAA compliance, you can think of it almost like infection control, where it's like you're never going to be 100%, but but there's a real core issue here. Infection control, we don't want to have cross contamination and infection. And with HIPAA, it's patients' privacy and security of their information. I think that gets lost in HIPAA, because people get like, I see online people saying like, I got this, can I respond to this review? And that is such almost, in my opinion, almost insignificant piece of HIPAA, where what we're really talking about is protecting our patients' privacy.
Yeah.
And also giving, the training is a very, like you said, it's a key part so that our team knows how to protect it. But it goes much deeper than that. And actually more, that's like talking about having, one aspect of infection control, like washing your hands versus, wearing masks and gloves and all the other things that go into infection control. So can you talk a little bit sort of like holistically, what are those other components other than the training that is key to a dental practice?
Yeah. And I think that you said something that's really important. And one of the things that when I go out and work with dental practices, I try to remind them is you want your patients to feel confident. Obviously, sometimes I feel like dental practices are kind of out of sight, out of mind when it comes to HIPAA, but you want your patients to come in. You want to know all their medical conditions. You want to know what medications they're on. You want to know all the pertinent aspects to their health information, because that probably guides some of the care that you're providing. Again, I'm not a dentist, but I've learned that over time. So when it comes to HIPAA has a lot of different pillars, and it can be really complicated looking at it, but that's really what we tried to simplify. So one of the things you have to do is what they consider the risk analysis. And what that ultimately is intended to show is what areas of vulnerability do you have? Now, every organization, as you said, you'll never be 100%. We're always going to have some type of risk, right? We're connected to the internet. We have humans that work for us. There's just environmental things that are impacted. So the risk analysis is really intended to say, hey, what areas do we have a little bit of vulnerabilities on? And can we do anything else to kind of correct them? So just a simple evaluation. Something might come out that, hey, we started emailing patient information to patients more frequently. We feel like we need to put some type of email encryption or secure communication with our patients to make sure that's protected. Let's do that. That can be a risk, and then the vulnerability, and then the correction of it. Where maybe there's another aspect of the fact that you live in a flooded area, or an area that floods more, and you can only do so much, and then you just have to accept the residual. So that's really the intent of the risk analysis. The policy and procedure aspect, really HIPAA says that ultimately, you need written policies and procedures for all of the HIPAA privacy, security, and breach notification rules. So that's the not so fun part of HIPAA, because if anybody's written policies and procedures, which I'm sure between infection control or other aspects of, just managing your practice, you have written policies and procedures. It can be very intense, but the HIPAA Autopilot product really just gets you to provide some key information that you need in order to customize. And then we do the rest of the work where we create the policies and procedures and then provide you with a guide to implement them. So the risk analysis, I kind of think about that as step 1 or step 2, depending on where you are in your program. And then written policies and procedures basically just tell the story about how you're complying with the HIPAA regulations. And then that really drives into training. When it comes to training, it's like, okay, if we're seeing a high increase in emails coming in that are phishing attempts, let's educate our staff on that. So that kind of drives what the education needs to be.
So do you see offices have had the general practices that you talk to, they've had a risk analysis done and they have policies and procedures in place, or they're kind of half done it, or they're fully compliant, kind of all the way there?
Yeah, I think for what I see the most is when there's been a change in the regulations. So like a lot of practices that I go into, they haven't had a risk analysis done in probably, since 2013 or ish, because that's when the last regulation changes. Now, HIPAA is a little bit vague on some things, and that's what makes it probably hard to implement. But, industry standard and kind of what we see coming out of resolution agreements, which are the agreements with healthcare providers and the federal government, are they looking for that on at least an annual basis? So I do see that they've had it, or they've attempted to do it something. The biggest thing I see when it comes to the risk analysis is they may do that, but then they don't mitigate or they don't fix anything. So we do help provide some guidance and some suggestions through that process as well. For the policies and procedures, I think you said it right. It's like we got these templates, or we got these half written, and we just stopped because we had bigger things to take care of. So again, policies and procedures, from a HIPAA standpoint may not change drastically unless the regulation changes or, maybe your technical infrastructure changes. But it is important that you do review those and at least, swipe off some of the dust that may get on them on I always say on an annual basis to update them. So they're done.
Oh, go ahead.
But I was going to say they're done, but they're not probably kept up to date.
Yeah. And I'll talk from my firsthand experience because, I have worked with you both for policies and procedures, risk assessment for my dental practices when I was kind of leading those, then with Opera GDS and now with toothapps, you're, working together with you on that. You just make it easy. And one of the things that I've learned from you is that a key piece here is that what you're doing is what's reflected in your procedure manual, and then what your procedure manual is reflective of what you're doing. And we all know after 365 days, one of those, you might shift what you're doing even for the better, right? But then that doesn't necessarily match what your procedure manual is. And so you just need to look at it and working with HIPAA, I mean, it's appropriately named HIPAA Autopilot because it's sort of like a very easy, inexpensive way to just get on top and stay on top of this. So that, because I believe strongly, and you probably have firsthand knowledge, that it's not like dental practices are knowingly going, I'm just going to ignore HIPAA for as long as possible. It's just it hasn't been on autopilot. So you look back, it's easy to look back 5, 7, 10 years and go, oh my God, we haven't done anything with our HIPAA policies for the last 5 years, right?
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And I think that's the benefit of having a product like this is it's easy to forget, right? Because it's not something that's always in the forefront of everything we do. So I, in the background, keep you up to date. We keep you going on an annual calendar. We remind you when you have to do your staff training and when it's time for that annual risk analysis again. And, maybe you miss it by a month or so, but again, there's no perfect time, but we do keep you and it is available. Or in the event, there's regulatory changes, we'll in the background make sure everything's up to date and push it out to you so that you have current and updated information. So I agree with you. I don't think anybody's maliciously saying, let's not comply with HIPAA because we don't want to deal with it. It's more out of sight, out of mind. You're so busy running a practice and making sure you have enough staff and that your patients are satisfied that sometimes the oversight of some of the background regulations is easily overlooked. So that's really where the tool can be helpful and keep you in compliance, because then you don't have to start your day thinking about it.
Yeah. And I do think that because the training piece can be oftentimes focused on things like the fines that are leveraged, like if, because there have been some massive fines. I believe that, a lot of practices and maybe even a lot of people who are out there lecturing about HIPAA are sort of stoking fear and making it almost more complicated than it is, because they start talking about the things that get a lot of news. Like if there's somebody at the front desk who says the wrong thing and somebody else overhears it, right? That is a concern. However, that gives, I think, people sort of this idea that HIPAA is just a gigantic difficulty, right? So I think it's great what HIPAA Autopilot does, where when it comes to sort of like that foundational work, you can just sort of almost think of like checking the box as we've got it covered.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, of course, I do talk about HIPAA fines, and we've seen kind of a shift in that happening. But I think the reality is that when you think about 10 to 15 fines a year and think about how many truly covered entities there are in the United States, it's really a needle in a haystack. But I bring it more from, these are things we can learn from, and these are things we can see what we can do better on. And that's really, really the benefit of some of that. I mean, I don't think people should be fearful of HIPAA or think they're going to get slapped with a multi-million-dollar fine because they don't have one policy in place. But I also think that people need to pay attention to it and make sure they do their due diligence. And that's really what the HIPAA Autopilot product can help people do.
So I see a lot of offices who are concerned, because I think there is a real, you talked a little bit before about not being a dentist, but that patients care about HIPAA, and shows, I just recently was driving and saw a big billboard by Apple that said Apple equals privacy or something like that. And then had the Apple logo look like a lock. And I think that there's an increase in consciousness of people, or awareness of people's privacy. I mean, look at what's happening with Facebook now. Meta changed their name basically because of their lack of privacy policies, right? So I mean, this is becoming a much bigger deal, and there's way more phishing attacks and ransomware attacks and attacks on people's health information, because it's becoming more valuable all the time. So I do think that this is, something that you could discuss with patients and actually have it be a point of pride of your practice, that just like with infection control, right? That you take their privacy seriously, so instead of just having like a form for people to sign, you could kind of have it as a point of pride that you truly are putting this into place. Yeah, I think that's more of a statement than a question, but I was kind of wanted to bring up something that you had talked about before, and it doesn't have to be difficult. I mean, I talk to people that are bringing, let's face it, there are some consultants out there who are charging a lot of money to implement these types of procedures. So could you kind of contrast how HIPAA Autopilot works versus what maybe there might be people listening to this podcast that are on an annual plan that's quite costly and laborious and time consuming?
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a great point when you talked about the increase in just awareness of privacy. I think, like you talked about, it's just more talked about in the news. I think the pandemic has really pushed forward some concern about just what's happening with my information. Where is it? How can I protect it? Who can see it? So I have been consulting one-on-one dental practices. I know how it works. And that's part of the reason that I created HIPAA Autopilot, is because I would go into a practice, I would get their risk analysis set up. I would help them change a few things along the way. We would implement their policies and procedures, train their staff, and then I would leave and it was up to them. And what I saw happening, because I would go back to these practices over and over again, is as soon as I walked out that door and it was up to them, life got too busy in the practice. They were hiring and firing. The front desk person was trying to get the bills paid, whatever it had happened. So then they wouldn't touch it. So that is a little bit about how HIPAA Autopilot is different. We work, and I try to encourage people not to rush through things. Obviously you could literally go in and get your policies and procedures and risk analysis done in less than a day. But I try to tell people to take it along the way. Like, once you get your policies done, let's take some time to implement them. So that's one of the things we do is with the policies and procedures. Once you get the packet of policies and procedures, we provide a step-by-step guide on how to implement them. So we tell you, for this policy, maybe you have to post your new notice of privacy practices on your website, or start collecting signatures in a different way. Or maybe a policy is literally just there in case the patient asks for an amendment to their medical record. But we guide you through all of that versus just handing you this and saying good luck. With the risk analysis piece of it, we not only identify the risk, but we make recommendations on how to fix the risk. I think that's an important aspect. And then we also provide a easy tool that can show how you're telling the story on how you're fixing the risk, because that's an important piece too. Identify, correct, or accept, and then document what you do. So the product keeps you along the line. Now, one of the things that I talked about was I would leave and nothing will get done. So what I've done is we actually do bite-sized pieces of HIPAA every month. And I don't want people to think that that's overwhelming. That's not the intent of it. What I try to do is keep you on it every month. I give you something little to do. For example, it might be, for last month, we looked at, review all your active users in your electronic systems to make sure that they're still employed by you or still need the access they do. It's called entitlement reviews. This month, I really have people focusing on making sure that they're updating their risk management from their risk analysis. So making sure they're doing their documentation. So I try to give you small things to do every single month to just kind of keep you in HIPAA compliance. So it's not just like a once of the year, I have to spend this week doing this stuff. It's kind of incremental throughout the year. So that has really helped people, I think, stay in HIPAA compliance, stay with it as a focus. And then we also provide monthly education updates for staff. So to keep reminding your staff that, different aspects of HIPAA, like only releasing the minimum necessary or paying attention to how to create a strong password or something simple like that, that they can bring up in a staff meeting, or they can bring up, they can forward an email or have staff read a little poster or something, just to kind of keep it front of the staff as well. Because again, when you're treating patients, you don't always think about it, but sometimes when you hear something, you can say, oh, I have to remember to lock my computer when I walk away for lunch break. So just simple things.
That's great. I think having it be this like a little bit, if you think of like the annual work and splitting it into 12 smaller chunks, it's going to be way easier and more effective, because then it's sort of keeping it top of mind. And it's funny, the ADA back in, I think it was in, I can't remember, it was March and then April, or April and then May. I believe it was in April. They sent out in the news, like a newsletter, just basically saying how there's been more ransomware attacks. And so be on the lookout to dental practices. Literally the next month, they were hit by the exact same thing that they had, and it was all from an email phishing thing that, with somebody clicking on the wrong link, right? So keeping that top of mind it protects your, protecting your patient's privacy is important, but where you're really protecting your practice too.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
It's a big deal that I think is becoming a much bigger deal over time that everybody's recognizing.
Right. Well, I think all of us has been touched in one way or another from getting a notice that, a data breach happened, whether it was somewhere where we shopped or at a practice we go to, or, bank or whatever it may be. So we're all kind of touched with it. So that's the other aspect of Planet HIPAA's HIPAA Autopilot, is really when you have something happen or you're unsure about something, you have someone to ask, because I'm just an email or a call away. And I know that as we reach out to our current clients, that is one of the top things that they say is sometimes we get into these situations and we don't know what to do, or we don't know if we have to report it. And that's the nice thing, is I'm here for questions and I'm here to talk through things if you need them. And I think that's been really beneficial to boosting confidence in the, not only the practice, but the person that's managing their HIPAA. Because it's not always, obviously I'm trained in HIPAA. I know HIPAA. I was educated in HIPAA, but not everybody is, right? And nor do dental practices have a need to employ someone full-time to just do HIPAA. There's just not a need. So it's given to people that maybe don't have the perfect background or don't have a lot of experience, but having that person that can, be there for them if they have a question really helps along the way as well.
Well, and somebody in the practice is going to be this privacy and/or security officer. And if they're not a HIPAA expert, just the amount of time that it would take to research and, versus sending you an email and getting, right. Because I know that's one of the things that when we were talking about, like the amount of time that offices save leveraging the automation and then also getting their questions answered efficiently has got to be massive.
I've worked with a practice that a provider spent literally 45 hours writing policies and procedures and researching. And I'm thinking that could have been patient care time or other time that could have been used productively. Not that it wasn't productive, but that could have been used elsewhere that could have benefited the practice. Where I have the knowledge, I have the skill, I know where to go. And to be able to support people with that, it's really actually, it not only makes me happy from a business perspective, but it also from a personal perspective, that's one of the goals of the product.
Oh yeah. That's why I don't do any construction anymore, because the first time you do it, it takes like 12 hours.
Yep.
And somebody that knows what they're doing, it takes them 10 minutes. Right. And if you factor in the amount that you're paying your team or that you're paying yourself or not paying yourself to do this work, it is just such a no-brainer. I mean,
Yeah.
it just relieves so much friction. And right now, it's not like, I mean, I just read that in 2020, it was about 47% of people were looking to switch jobs. Now it's like 74% are looking to switch companies. So that person that you're relying on in your office to do the HIPAA training or to be in control of it, if they leave, right, you want to have at least the backup systems in place so that it's like, well, we have it all set. Danika's got it covered. So so that, you know, if it goes from Bob to Jane, Jane's set up for success. And frankly, it's not like we hire people, we screen them and go, boy, how's your knowledge of HIPAA compliance, right?
No. And a lot of times it's just given to someone too, right? You're the practice manager, you get to wear the HIPAA privacy and security role hat, which is good. It actually brings up another good point about the product that we have. Besides the monthly missions, I call them, which are the educational updates and the small tasks, we also do monthly educations that are like 15 to 30 minutes long. And they're really intended for that privacy and security officer for that exact reason. I don't intend to ever make anybody HIPAA experts unless they want to, but I provide guidance a little bit more on the regulations so that they feel a little bit more confident in managing it within their practice. And those are always available and recorded. We keep them out there for 6 months at a time, or, you know, if you have to go back, they've been really beneficial to just kind of help the person managing it have a little bit more knowledge. Or sometimes we go through the product and really dive into different pieces of the product and why it's out there and what problem it solves a little bit more, to help them along the ways. And you said something that was really vital. That's the other thing that the HIPAA Autopilot product can do, is build that continuity, right? When you have practice manager A, now it's someone else, and they have to come in and pick up where they left off. A lot of times I can just meet with them for 15 or 20 minutes, show them where the last person left off and the product, and they're off and running with it. So it creates that kind of continuity that you have, which is important for managing a program too.
That's fantastic. And so I'm very excited because HIPAA Autopilot is on toothapps, which is our very first toothapps connected partner, which I'm jazzed about, because obviously what we're doing is bringing core applications to, and really like-minded applications that are innovative, that are solving issues in the industry, like HIPAA Autopilot. And I know you've generously offered 30 days for free for offices to try out HIPAA Autopilot, which is great because then they can kind of get in and play around with it. So could you talk a little bit about sort of that offer and then what people can expect with that?
Yeah. I mean, the product that I have created, I really want people to feel confident and to feel like it's the right product for them. We're so excited to partner with toothapps and be part of their product. And so if you go into the product, you know, it actually provides you step-by-step guidance. So you go in, there's going to be a section that talks about, hey, start here. It'll interact with a video that kind of shows you a little bit of a preview of the product, how you're going to work with it, how you're going to interact with it. And then the rest of the product is really taken step 1. And then we have sub-steps A, B, and C, step 2, sub-steps A, B, and C. So it's built to be pretty intuitive. It's not going to mean that you don't get hung up, that you don't have a question. And again, we're always here for questions, but we really want our clients and the people that are using the product to feel that it's the right fit for their organization. So within 30 days, if you're thinking that it isn't the right fit or it doesn't meet the needs that you have, that's okay. We understand, and you know, we'll happily close the account at that point in time. But I'm pretty confident that if you get in and see what the product is and see how it can benefit your organization, that you're gonna like it and you're gonna continue with the product. The other thing that's nice about our product that I didn't mention earlier is that we do refresh training on an annual basis. So your staff, we do annual staff training. Your staff don't hear the same thing after year because that can get mundane. So we try to keep it up to date. So every January, there's a fresh new training for your staff. And that's just an important component as well. So again, we feel really confident you're going to get in the product and you're going to like what it has to offer and how it can help your organization. And if it doesn't work out or if it's not the right fit, we do offer that 30-day free.
That's great. And you know, right now, I think dental practices profitability is being squeezed because of the, inflation going up and reimbursements going down from insurance companies, wage inflation, and finding good people is hard. So whatever we can do to automate things inexpensively, and at toothapps we want to be simple. We want everything that is just work sort of in a very simple, easy fashion,
Right.
and then also provide massive value. And I know that's obviously we're philosophically aligned in that, because you take something which is, I believe, an oftentimes overly complex topic, HIPAA, and really simplify it and make it so that it's easy, both from a operational standpoint, but then also it's, this is a product that, just from the time savings more than pays for itself. So I urge everybody watching it, click the link around here, try out HIPAA Autopilot. It's fantastic. And I'm so honored to be talking with you, Danika, about it today. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And thank you. We are so excited, and we hope that everybody can join the product and enjoy the HIPAA Autopilot product.